Pain that is ignored doesn't disappear. It doesn't simply fade away with time or dissolve into nothingness. It buries itself deep within you, settling in places you don't even realize, waiting for the right moment to surface. It seeps into your thoughts, your emotions, your decisions, and even your relationships. It shows up when you least expect it, in ways you don't anticipate. Through anger, anxiety, self-doubt, or emotional numbness. The reality is that pain that goes unaddressed does not stay hidden forever. It will find a way to express itself, whether through physical tension in your body, negative thought patterns, or unhealthy coping mechanisms. But many people refuse to acknowledge their pain. They pretend they are fine, convincing themselves that if they just keep moving forward, the pain will eventually disappear on its own. They tell themselves that it's not a big deal, that they shouldn't feel the way they do, that they have to be strong. And so they push it aside, suppressing their emotions, burying their hurt beneath layers of distraction, work, entertainment, or even toxic habits. They might laugh with friends, show up for work, and go about their daily routines, but deep inside, something feels off. There's an emptiness, a heaviness that lingers beneath the surface. Ignoring pain doesn't make you stronger. It makes you weaker. It chips away at your sense of self, creating an internal battle between what you feel and what you tell yourself you should feel. The mind is powerful, but it cannot sustain a life forever. If you are feeling pain, if you are struggling with something, pretending it doesn't exist does not make it go away. It only allows it to grow stronger in the shadows. You may think you're in control of your emotions, but the truth is, the emotions you suppress are the ones that control you the most. Pain that is left unchecked becomes resentment. It turns into bitterness. It poisons your thoughts. It creates invisible barriers between you and the people who love you. You start to see the world through the lens of your wounds, interpreting everything through the filter of past hurt. A simple comment from someone might trigger an overreaction because it reminds you of something painful from your past. A small inconvenience might feel like a personal attack because you've been carrying emotional weight for too long. The longer you deny your pain, the more it shapes your reality in ways you don't even realize. Many people believe that acknowledging pain is a sign of weakness. They think that if they admit they're hurting, it means they're not strong enough, not resilient enough, not tough enough. But this belief is completely false. It takes far more strength to confront your emotions than it does to run from them. It takes courage to look within and face what you've been avoiding. It takes wisdom to understand that healing begins with acceptance, not denial. When you refuse to acknowledge pain, you are essentially fighting a war against yourself. You are suppressing something that is begging to be heard. Your mind and body are designed to process emotions, not to store them indefinitely. Think about it. When you experience physical pain, you don't ignore it. If you break a bone, you don't pretend it didn't happen and hope it fixes itself. You seek treatment. You allow it to heal. Emotional pain is no different. It requires attention. It requires care. It requires you to stop pretending that everything is fine when it isn't. But some people suppress their pain by staying busy. They work longer hours, take on more responsibilities, and fill their schedule with endless distractions so they don't have to stop and think. They convince themselves that if they just stay occupied, they won't have time to feel the weight of their emotions. But no matter how busy you keep yourself, your pain does not disappear. It waits. It waits for the quiet moments, the moments when you're alone with your thoughts, the moments when you finally slow down. And when it resurfaces, it often feels even heavier than before. Other people numb their pain. They turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms: alcohol, overeating, excessive social media, meaningless relationships, anything to escape the discomfort of their emotions. But numbing is not healing. It's only a temporary escape, a band-aid on a wound that needs deep healing. The more you try to suppress your pain, the more power it gains over you. What you don't deal with today will eventually demand your attention tomorrow. And then there are those who try to rationalize their pain away. They tell themselves that other people have it worse, that they should be grateful for what they have, that their feelings aren't justified. But comparing your pain to someone else's does not make yours any less real. Just because someone else is struggling doesn't mean your struggles don't matter. Pain is personal. It doesn't need validation from the outside world to be acknowledged. Healing begins when you stop lying to yourself, when you stop saying, "I'm fine," when you know you're not, when you stop pretending that it doesn't hurt when deep inside you know it's killing you. The moment you allow yourself to feel what you've been suppressing, you take the first step toward freeing yourself from it. Healing doesn't happen by accident. It's a choice, a conscious decision to face what you've been avoiding, to sit with your emotions instead of running from them, to acknowledge your pain instead of pretending it doesn't exist. Most people fear that if they acknowledge their pain, it will consume them. But the truth is, pain only consumes you when you don't face it. When you confront it, when you give yourself permission to feel, you take back control. You shift from being a victim of your emotions to being the one in charge of them. You realize that pain is not permanent. It's a signal, a message, a lesson. But only if you're willing to listen. Many people go through life carrying emotional burdens that were never meant for them to bear. They hold on to guilt for things that were out of their control. They carry resentment for wounds that someone else inflicted. They live with fear that was planted in them by another person's insecurities. And yet, they walk around as if this weight is their responsibility, as if they have no choice but to bear the load. They tell themselves that they must be strong, that they must endure, that they must keep pushing forward even when the weight becomes unbearable. But here's the truth. Most of the pain people carry does not belong to them. It was handed to them by someone else, and they accepted it without even realizing it. Think about the times you've been hurt by someone's words, their actions, or their neglect. In those moments, you may have taken on emotions that weren't yours to begin with. Someone's cruelty made you feel unworthy. Someone's betrayal made you feel unlovable. Someone's indifference made you feel invisible. And instead of recognizing that their behavior was a reflection of them, not you, you absorbed it. You made it part of your identity. People often hold onto past wounds because they believe that letting go means that what happened didn't matter. They think that if they release the anger, the resentment, or the disappointment, it means they are allowing the other person to win. But in reality, holding on to that pain does not punish the person who hurt you. It only punishes you. It keeps you trapped in the past, reliving moments that no longer exist. It keeps you emotionally chained to people who have long since moved on. Carrying what isn't yours robs you of your peace. It fills your mind with thoughts that drain your energy and steal your happiness. It makes you question your worth, your abilities, and your potential. And the longer you carry it, the heavier it becomes. What started as a single painful experience turns into a pattern of negative self-talk. A moment of rejection turns into a lifetime of self-doubt. A single betrayal turns into years of mistrust. This is how pain compounds when it is not released. Some people carry guilt that does not belong to them. They feel responsible for the pain of others, believing that they should have done more, said something different, or acted another way. They take on the burden of fixing problems they did not create. They sacrifice their own well-being in an attempt to make things right for someone else. But here's what they fail to realize. People are responsible for their own emotions, their own choices, and their own healing. You are not responsible for saving someone who refuses to save themselves. You are not responsible for carrying the emotional weight of someone who refuses to do their own inner work. Other people carry shame that was placed upon them by someone else. Maybe they grew up in an environment where they were made to feel like they were never enough. Maybe they were in a relationship where they were constantly criticized, belittled, or ignored. Maybe they were told that their dreams were unrealistic, that their feelings were invalid, that their worth was conditional. And over time, they started to believe it. They took on the shame, even though it was never theirs to own. They internalized the voices of others and made them their own. Fear is another weight that many people carry without realizing that it doesn't belong to them. Fear is often passed down from generation to generation, from person to person. A parent's fear of failure becomes a child's self-doubt. A teacher's skepticism becomes a student's limiting belief. A friend's negativity becomes another friend's insecurity. People project their own fears onto others, and if you are not careful, you will start carrying fear that was never yours to begin with. You will start believing in limitations that do not exist. You will start doubting yourself, not because you are incapable, but because someone else convinced you to. Letting go of what isn't yours is not an act of weakness, it is an act of strength. It is a decision to stop allowing your past to define you. It is a choice to reclaim your peace, to release the burdens that have been weighing you down, and to step into a life that is free from the emotional baggage that was never yours to carry in the first place. It requires the courage to acknowledge that not every battle is yours to fight. Not every wound is yours to hold on to. And not every emotion that you feel is a reflection of who you truly are. There is a profound freedom that comes with realizing that you do not have to carry everything that has been handed to you. You do not have to hold on to the pain of betrayal, the disappointment of failure, or the weight of someone else's expectations. You do not have to bear the responsibility of fixing what others have broken. You do not have to continue living under the shadow of someone else's words, actions, or beliefs. You have the power to put the weight down. You have the power to choose what you allow into your mind, your heart, and your life. Most people do not realize how much unnecessary weight they are carrying until they finally let it go. They do not realize how much of their exhaustion comes from holding onto emotions that serve no purpose. They do not realize how much lighter life can feel when they release the burdens that were never theirs to begin with. It is only when they finally decide to let go of guilt, of fear, of resentment, that they understand what it truly means to be free. People become prisoners of their own silence, trapped within the walls of emotions they refuse to express. They carry their pain in secret, hiding it behind smiles, laughter, and casual conversations, believing that if they don't talk about it, it will eventually disappear. They tell themselves that speaking about their struggles makes them weak, that no one will understand, or that others have bigger problems, so theirs are not worth mentioning. And so they bottle everything up, pushing their emotions down deeper and deeper until they become a heavy, suffocating weight pressing on their chest. But silence is not healing. It is not strength. It is not resilience. Silence is a slow form of self-destruction, a slow erosion of the soul. The longer emotions remain unspoken, the more power they gain. Unexpressed pain does not dissolve, it festers. It turns into anger, anxiety, depression, or a deep sense of emptiness. It manifests in ways people don't even recognize. It affects their thoughts, their actions, their decisions, and their relationship. It makes them short-tempered, irritable, or distant. It causes them to overreact to small things, not because of the present moment, but because of everything they have been suppressing for so long. Some people convince themselves that their emotions don't matter, that they should just suck it up and move on. They grew up in environments where emotions were dismissed, where expressing feelings was seen as weakness, where vulnerability was punished instead of embraced. And so they learned to keep everything inside. They learned to be strong by being silent. They learned that talking about their pain made others uncomfortable, so they stopped sharing. They became masters at pretending, at carrying burdens without showing the weight of them, at convincing the world that they are fine when in reality they are barely holding themselves together. But no matter how much someone buries their pain, it always finds a way to surface. It appears in their sleepless nights, in their racing thoughts, in the way their heart pounds when they least expect it. It shows up in the way they struggle to trust, in the way they pull away from people who care about them, in the way they sabotage their own happiness because deep down they don't believe they deserve it. Pain that is not expressed turns into patterns that repeat themselves. It creates cycles of self-doubt, insecurity, and emotional detachment. It builds walls between people, making it harder to connect, harder to love, harder to be truly present in life. Some turn their unspoken emotions into self-sabotage. They engage in behaviors that they know are destructive. Procrastination, overindulgence, reckless decisions, because on a subconscious level, they are trying to escape. They don't want to sit alone with their thoughts. They don't want to feel the weight of everything they have been suppressing. So they run, they distract themselves. They fill every moment with noise, with movement, with anything that keeps them from facing what is truly going on inside. But avoidance does not equal healing. Running from emotions only ensures that they will keep chasing you. Others turn their silence into resentment. They hold grudges, not necessarily against others, but against life itself. They feel anger that they can't quite explain, frustration that never fully goes away. They look at the world through a lens of disappointment because they have never allowed themselves to truly process the things that hurt them. They have never given themselves permission to acknowledge their pain, so instead they become bitter. They assume that the world is against them, that people cannot be trusted, that happiness is something meant for others but not for them. But in reality, they are not fighting the world, they are fighting themselves. They are battling everything they have kept inside for far too long. Emotions are meant to be felt, expressed, and processed. They are not meant to be trapped inside, piling up until they become unbearable. The human mind is not designed to carry unspoken pain indefinitely. Eventually, it spills over. It might come out in an explosion of anger, in an uncontrollable breakdown, or in a deep emotional numbness that makes everything feel empty and meaningless. The longer emotions remain unspoken, the harder they become to untangle. Some people hold everything inside because they don't want to burden others. They believe that their problems are theirs alone to deal with, that no one else should have to carry their pain. But true strength is not found in suffering alone. True strength is found in allowing yourself to be vulnerable, in acknowledging that you are human, in recognizing that healing happens through connection, not isolation. The mind heals through expression, through words, through conversations, through releasing what has been suppressed for too long. There is no shame in feeling pain. There is no weakness in admitting that you are struggling. Pretending that everything is fine when it isn't does not make you strong. It only prolongs your suffering. The most powerful thing you can do is give yourself permission to feel, to speak, to release the emotions that have been weighing you down. Because silence does not heal. It only keeps you trapped in the pain that you refuse to acknowledge. People underestimate the power of the thoughts they allow to take root in their minds. They assume that their thoughts are just passing moments, harmless observations, fleeting emotions that come and go without consequence. But what they fail to realize is that every thought, especially the ones repeated over and over, begins to shape their perception of the world, their self-image, their confidence, and even the direction of their life. The mind is like fertile soil, and whatever is planted in it, whether good or bad, will eventually grow and take hold. Negative thoughts are not just harmless whispers in the background. They are seeds that, once planted, grow into deep-rooted beliefs. They dictate how people see themselves, how they interpret their experiences, and how they respond to life's challenges. A single negative thought left unchallenged can spiral into an entire belief system that holds a person back from their potential. It starts as a quiet doubt, a moment of hesitation, a small voice that says, "What if I'm not good enough?" And if that thought is entertained long enough, it solidifies. It turns into, maybe I really am not good enough. And then eventually I will never be enough. Before they even realize it, that one thought has taken root and become a part of their identity. Most people don't question their thoughts. They assume that if a thought enters their mind, it must be true. But the mind is filled with influences. Past experiences, societal expectations, the opinions of others, and fears that were passed down from previous generations. Not every thought that enters the mind is reality. Many thoughts are simply echoes of past conditioning, words that were once spoken by others but internalized as personal truths. A parent's criticism, a teacher's doubt, a friend's discouragement. These voices, once heard often enough, become internalized and mistaken for personal belief. And so without realizing it, people begin to sabotage themselves. They hesitate when opportunities arise because their mind whispers, "You're not ready." They avoid risk because they've convinced themselves, "You'll probably fail." They shrink themselves in relationships because a past rejection planted the thought, "You're not lovable." They hold back in their careers because an old insecurity tells them, "You're not smart enough." And over time, these thoughts don't just affect their actions, they shape their entire reality. What makes this dangerous is that the mind will always look for proof of what it already believes. If someone believes they are unworthy, their brain will filter the world in a way that confirms that belief. They will focus on every rejection, every mistake, every criticism, while completely overlooking moments of love, appreciation, and success. It's not that those positive moments don't exist. It's that the mind has been trained to ignore them. The subconscious mind is always working to reinforce whatever beliefs a person holds, even if those beliefs are harmful. But just as the mind can be programmed with negativity, it can also be rewired for strength, confidence, and resilience. Thoughts are not fixed. They can be reshaped, restructured, and replaced. The process begins with awareness, with catching those negative thoughts the moment they arise and questioning them. Is this thought really true, or is it just an old belief that I've been holding on to? Most of the time, people will find that their negative thoughts are not based on facts, but on fears, assumptions, or past experiences that no longer serve them. Once those thoughts are identified, they can be challenged. A person who constantly thinks, "I'm not good enough," must learn to counter that with, "I am more than enough, and I am constantly growing." A person who tells themselves, "I always fail," must shift to, "Every setback is a lesson, and I always find a way forward." It may feel unnatural at first because the mind is resistant to change, but over time, with enough repetition, new beliefs will take root. This is why what people say to themselves matters. The words they repeat in their mind shape the way they see the world. A person who constantly thinks life is unfair and nothing ever works out for me will unconsciously make choices that align with that belief. They will overlook opportunities. They will stay in situations that no longer serve them. And they will sabotage their own progress without even realizing it. On the other hand, a person who trains their mind to think, "Life is full of opportunities, and I am capable of achieving anything," will start to see possibilities where others see obstacles. The mind must be protected because it is the foundation of everything. The conversations people have with themselves are more powerful than the conversations they have with anyone else. If they tell themselves they are weak, they will act weak. If they tell themselves they are incapable, they will hesitate and miss opportunities. If they tell themselves they are unlucky, they will notice only the misfortunes and overlook the blessing. But if they tell themselves they are strong, capable, and worthy, their actions will begin to reflect that. People think that their biggest battles are external, but in reality, the greatest battle is always within. The war is not with the world, it is with the thoughts they allow to dominate their minds. Winning in life starts with winning in the mind. And that victory begins with choosing which thoughts are allowed to stay and which ones must be eliminated before they take root and become limitation. The human mind is designed for survival, not necessarily for happiness. It is wired to seek out potential dangers, to anticipate problems, and to focus on the things that could go wrong. This is a built-in defense mechanism, a trait that was useful in ancient times when physical threats were everywhere. But in today's world, where survival is no longer about outrunning predators, but about navigating emotional and psychological challenges, this same mechanism can become a burden. It makes people fixate on their fears, dwell on their failures, and replay painful memories over and over again. Instead of focusing on solutions, they focus on problems. Instead of seeing opportunities, they see obstacles. And instead of moving forward, they get stuck in cycles of negativity, overthinking, and self-doubt. Negative emotions, when left unchecked, begin to dictate the way people experience life. They shape how they interpret events, how they respond to challenges, and even how they perceive themselves. When someone is consumed by anger, sadness, or disappointment, everything around them starts to reflect that emotion. A simple comment from a friend can feel like criticism. A small inconvenience can feel like a catastrophe. A minor mistake can feel like absolute failure. The mind amplifies whatever emotion is dominant, which is why negative emotions can feel so overwhelming. The longer they are allowed to linger, the more control they have. The problem is that most people never learn how to manage their emotions. They assume that emotions are things that just happen to them, things they have no control over. When they feel sad, they assume they must stay sad until the feeling passes. When they feel anxious, they assume they have to wait for the anxiety to disappear on its own. But emotions are not permanent states. They are responses, temporary reactions to thoughts and external circumstances. They can be changed, redirected, and transformed. But this requires awareness. It requires the ability to recognize an emotion in the moment and take conscious steps to shift it. One of the biggest reasons negative emotions have so much power over people is because they resist them instead of acknowledging them. When someone feels pain, they try to suppress it. When they feel angry, they try to deny it. When they feel hurt, they convince themselves that they are fine. But what is suppressed does not disappear. It only grows stronger. The mind does not forget emotions that have been ignored. It stores them, keeps them hidden beneath the surface, and allows them to influence thoughts and behaviors in ways that people don't even realize. Suppressed emotions manifest as stress, tension, and eventually burnout. They create patterns of self-sabotage, making people repeat the same mistakes, attract the same problems, and feel the same pain over and over again. The key to overcoming negative emotions is not to fight them, but to understand them. Every emotion is a signal. It is the mind's way of communicating that something needs attention. Anger is a sign that boundaries have been crossed. Sadness is a sign that something valuable has been lost. Anxiety is a sign that there is uncertainty or fear about the future. Instead of suppressing these emotions, they need to be processed. They need to be acknowledged, understood, and then consciously shifted. One of the most powerful ways to manage emotions is to change focus. The mind can only concentrate on one dominant thought at a time. If the focus is on problems, fears, or past mistakes, those things will continue to grow. But if the focus is shifted to solutions, goals, and positive actions, emotions will begin to change as well. It is impossible to feel hopeless while focusing on possibilities. It is impossible to feel powerless while taking action. The mind follows where attention is directed, and emotions follow the mind. Another way to shift emotions is through movement. The body and mind are connected in ways most people don't realize. When emotions are stagnant, the body becomes tense. When thoughts are negative, posture changes, breathing becomes shallow, and energy levels drop. But the opposite is also true. When the body moves, the mind shifts. Physical movement, whether it's exercise, deep breathing, or even just standing up and walking, sends signals to the brain that change emotional states. A person cannot remain stuck in a negative emotional loop if they engage in movement that disrupts that state. Another factor that influences emotions is language. The words people use to describe their experiences shape how they feel about them. Saying, "I'm devastated," creates a much stronger emotional reaction than saying, "I'm disappointed, but I'll find a way forward." The way an experience is framed determines its emotional impact. This is why successful people are mindful of their words. They do not allow themselves to speak in ways that reinforce negativity. Instead of saying everything is going wrong, they say, "This is a challenge, but I am learning from it." Instead of saying, "I always fail," they say, "Every setback is temporary and I am growing stronger." Language rewires the brain. Words are not just descriptions, they are instructions to the subconscious mind. Another way to overcome negative emotions is to stop identifying with them. Many people say, "I am sad," or "I am anxious," as if these emotions define who they are. But emotions are experiences, not identities. Instead of saying, "I am angry," it is more effective to say, "I am experiencing anger, but it is temporary." This small shift creates psychological distance from the emotion, making it easier to manage. Emotions lose their power when they are seen as passing states rather than permanent conditions. Most people believe that emotions come from external circumstances, but in reality, emotions are created internally. The same situation can create different emotions in different people depending on how they interpret it. Someone who loses a job might see it as a tragedy, while another might see it as an opportunity for something better. Someone who faces rejection might feel worthless, while another might see it as a sign to move in a new direction. The external event is the same, but the emotional response is different because the interpretation is different. Mastering emotions is not about eliminating negative feelings altogether. It is about learning how to navigate them. It is about recognizing that emotions do not have to dictate actions, that they do not have to be permanent, and that they can be consciously shifted. It is about realizing that the power to change how one feels is always within reach. People often carry their pain in silence, believing that if they just keep pushing forward, if they distract themselves enough, if they pretend hard enough, eventually the pain will fade on its own. But that is not how the mind works. Unprocessed emotions do not simply disappear. They settle deep within, influencing thoughts, behaviors, and even physical health. The weight of unresolved pain doesn't just linger. It multiplies. It manifests in ways people don't recognize, showing up as self-doubt, procrastination, unhealthy coping mechanisms, or a constant underlying sense of dissatisfaction with life. No matter how much someone tries to ignore it, the pain remains, shaping their reality in ways they don't even realize. Ignoring emotional pain is like covering a deep wound with a thin bandage and expecting it to heal on its own. If a physical wound is left untreated, it gets infected, spreads, and causes even greater harm. The same is true for emotional wounds. Suppressing pain only allows it to fester, and over time, it affects every area of life: relationships, careers, self-esteem, and even physical health. Studies have shown that prolonged emotional distress contributes to anxiety, depression, high blood pressure, and even weakened immune function. The mind and body are deeply connected, and what is not healed emotionally will often manifest physically. One of the biggest misconceptions about pain is that time alone will heal it. People often say, give it time, as if time itself has the power to remove suffering. But time does not heal, only action does. A wound left untreated does not close on its own, it worsens. Emotional healing, just like physical healing, requires active effort. It requires acknowledging the pain, understanding it, and taking steps to process and release it. Healing is not passive, it is an intentional process. Many people avoid facing their pain because they fear it will overwhelm them. They believe that if they allow themselves to feel it fully, it will consume them, that they won't be able to handle the intensity of it. But pain is not something that grows stronger when acknowledged. It grows stronger when ignored. When someone finally allows themselves to sit with their emotions, to truly feel and understand them, the pain loses its power. It becomes something that can be worked through rather than something that controls their life from the shadows. Yeah. One of the most important steps in healing is understanding that pain is not the enemy. Pain is a messenger. It exists to signal that something needs attention, that something needs to change. It is the mind's way of saying, look here, this part of you needs healing. But instead of listening, most people try to silence it. They bury themselves in work, in distractions, in unhealthy relationships, in anything that keeps them from having to face what's really going on inside. But no matter how far they run, the pain remains, waiting to be acknowledged. Emotional healing begins with honesty. It requires the courage to admit when something is not okay. It requires looking inward and asking, what am I really feeling? Why am I feeling this way? What is this pain trying to tell me? It means recognizing the source of the pain, whether it's past trauma, unresolved grief, betrayal, or unfulfilled expectations, and allowing oneself to fully process it. Pain does not disappear when it is ignored. It disappears when it is faced, understood, and released. Releasing pain is not about forgetting what happened or pretending it didn't matter. It is about removing the emotional charge attached to it. It is about freeing oneself from the constant replaying of past events, from the resentment, from the anger, from the sadness that weighs them down. It is about learning to separate the past from the present, understanding that what happened may have shaped them, but it does not have to define them. One of the most effective ways to release pain is through self-expression. When emotions are kept inside, they build up like pressure in a sealed container, but when they are expressed through writing, speaking, art, movement, they begin to lose their intensity. Journaling is a powerful tool for emotional release. Writing down thoughts and feelings without filtering them allows the mind to process emotions in a way that thinking alone cannot. Talking to someone, whether it's a trusted friend, a mentor, or a professional, can also help bring clarity and relief. Expressing emotions is not a sign of weakness, it is a necessary step in healing. Another crucial part of healing is forgiveness, not just of others, but of oneself. Many people carry pain because they are unable to forgive themselves for past mistakes, for the things they wish they had done differently. They replay past failures, regrets, and missed opportunities, punishing themselves over and over again. But self-forgiveness is essential for growth. It is the understanding that mistakes are lessons, not life sentences. It is realizing that every person is constantly evolving, and holding on to guilt or shame only delays that evolution. Healing also requires letting go of the belief that the past could have been different. Many people stay stuck in pain because they keep revisiting past events, wishing they had played out another way. If only I had done this. If only they had said that. If only things had turned out differently. But the past is unchangeable. The only thing that can be changed is how it is perceived. Shifting from why did this happen to what can I learn from this, transforms pain into wisdom. It allows a person to reclaim their power instead of staying trapped in what they cannot control. Another powerful tool for emotional healing is gratitude. It may seem impossible to feel grateful while experiencing pain, but gratitude does not mean ignoring hardships. It means choosing to focus on what remains instead of what was lost. It means acknowledging that even in difficult moments, there is still something to be thankful for. Gratitude shifts the mind from lack to abundance, from suffering to strength. It reminds people that even though they have endured pain, they have also survived it. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Suffering happens when pain is held on to, when it is relived over and over again, when it is allowed to take root in the mind. But healing begins the moment a person decides to stop carrying pain as part of their identity. It begins when they stop defining themselves by their wounds and start defining themselves by their ability to rise above them. It begins when they recognize that their past does not have to dictate their future, that they are not powerless in their healing, and that they have the strength to let go of what no longer serves them.